I'm Rachel Madel from Talking with Tech.
And I'm Chris Bouguet from Talking with Tech.
We have a podcast dedicated to augmentative and alternative communication, all things related to helping kids with complex communication needs.
If you have a passion for helping people with language disabilities, this is the show for you. Each episode features an interview or a roundtable discussion on a topic related to augmentative communication and helping people with language disabilities.
And we're really passionate about giving practical strategies to clinicians working in the field who are working with children or adults, anything related to AAC.
So you can look us up on iTunes, or you can find us on Facebook. We got a group over there, or check out our website at bit.ly/TWT podcast.
Please join our community of professionals that are working to ensure that everyone can say whatever they want to say, however they want to say it.
Please listen carefully.
What is communication?
An essential behavior of life. We have the both blessing and responsibility of trying to foster another.
It's the strongest way for two people to convey information to each other.
Communication is a lifeline.
It's just connection with other people.
Connecting people in terms of ideas, thoughts, or needs.
Draws us out of ourselves, draws us into that relationship, builds up our families. Without it, we'd be lost.
Whatever it is that we do to express intent and achieve an impact.
Communication is the ability to express your needs, wants, frustrations, and desires to anyone that you feel needs to have that information.
Welcome to episode 85 of the Speech Science Podcast. We are proud members of the Exceptional Podcast Network. I'm Matt Hott, joined in the Midwest by Michelle Wintering.
Hi, Matt. I know we've had this debate, actually, if it's the South or the Midwest, because I'm in Kentucky.
Kentucky is kind of the middle of nowhere, so I love Kentucky.
I'm only 2 hours south of you, sir.
I know. That's what I mean. It's like kind of in the middle of everywhere I want to go. I like Kentucky, but I don't know. And in a state that I do know is sort of on the East Coast, Michael McLeod.
What's up, buddy? How are you?
It is the East Coast, right? In Pennsylvania?
Yeah, it definitely is.
Oh, guys, I'm so excited to be back on air. And today was an exciting day. I had tech training at the new school, and they gave me a Google Chromebook. And I want you guys to know that officially I feel old because I didn't know how to use my Google Chromebook out of the box.
Oh, look at that, Matt. You had to do some problem solving. Was it pretty easy setup, though?
Yeah, it was nice. It was, so if you work in schools, you might know like Blackboard and Mastercraft and Dazzle and IEP Anywhere and kind of a crash course on how to use all of that with the Google Chromebook. And I'll be honest, 5 years ago, I feel like you could have handed me any technology and I would have been able to go off to the races with it. They handed me this Google Chromebook, and then I got confused when I could hold it like a tablet. And I'm sure I felt like my dad when I give him new technology and I look at it and have to take a few minutes before I go, I need help.
You could just ask your, 6-year-old son?
Oh, you know what was cute though the other day?
I'm just saying they figure it out real quick.
He was washing tomatoes in the sink. So I'm glad that he knows how to do that and maybe not run my Google Chromebook.
Fair enough.
Michelle, we'll start with you. What has baby speech science done this week?
Well, he is still refusing to let go when he walks around holding on to things. So he's not walking independently yet, but he's using probably 4 or 5 different signs now because I've been signing with him a lot. And he's just fun. 1 year old is a fun age, a challenging age, but a fun age.
Wait till he's 2 and you want to strangle him for screaming at you for 4 hours and not knowing what he wants.
Yeah, that happens now too. But then adjusting for him and for me with him in daycare while I'm working. And speaking of learning technology, every time you start a new job, right, the documentation system is different. And that's always been the biggest challenge for me, starting a new job, even though I think I'm pretty decent at figuring it out. But sometimes documentation systems are not intuitive.
What are you using over there? Do you know?
Oh, this one's a hospital-based one. It's Meditech.
I've not heard that one. I've used Kasamba, and I thought that was nice until they updated it, and then I wanted to strangle
The ones in the hospitals I know are Meditech and Epic, but I know there's others. And then in my last 2 clinics, privately owned ones that were just rehab clinics, we used Clinic Source, which was specific to rehab, but Meditech and Epic and some of the other big ones are whole programs that are meant for the whole hospital.
Michael, you are hopefully maybe baby-free in Philadelphia. What system do you guys use in your private practice?
Baby-free.
Various. We really work with each individual family to really figure out what works best for them.
Mm-hmm.
So we really, certain families want handwritten notes, certain families want, things typed up. So we really, we tailor to the individual family for those specific needs.
Man, private practice sounds so much more fun.
It certainly has its ups and downs. It definitely does.
It's like, oh, you want a handwritten note? I will handwrite you a note right here. Like or like home healthcare, they're like, can you do this 18-step checkbox? And then if you don't do it right, we're not going to tell you. And them being the computer system, not going to tell you what you did wrong until you second check everything before you can sign it. Oh, it's taking you 2 hours? Sorry.
Yeah, that sounds bad. That sounds really bad.
Now, you also, I know you've said before, Mike, with private practice, you do provide super bills to your families. Is that right?
Yes, I do. Yep.
So that is just where you're providing documentation and the codes for them to submit to insurance?
Exactly. Yes, where they're able to potentially receive some out-of-network benefits by submitting a paid receipt to their insurance,
and can retroactively get paid back. Got it.
Yep.
Very cool.
See, you make private practice seem easy, and I know from your Facebook and our conversations before that you are probably one of the hardest working people that I know to keep that private practice running. But like, man, you describe it and it makes me want to run out tomorrow and start a private practice out of my backyard.
Well, us SLPs are really capable of doing anything. So that's a real fact. So we work so hard in this graduate program and all the prerequisites and bachelors we have to do and our externships. And we're really, sometimes we kind of blend in with all the other people, but I think us SLPs are shoulders above everybody else.
Well, I'm a type B person, so I don't think I can do that.
No, you're type,
I
you're
think
type
you
A.
could. You have enough middle ground on that, Matt. You are not strictly type B.
Oh, I am. I put up a very good facade. I'm that extroverted introvert, I guess you could say. But we want to hear from you at home before we get too far. Make sure you head over to our website, speechsciencepodcast.com. And from there, you can find all of our previous episodes. Also, check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/speechsciencepodcast. And we want to hear from you, so this is where you interact. So get out your cell phone, 614-681-1798. Save that thing because you can text us during the show or give us a phone call and leave us a voicemail or email us, speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com. Or if you love the social media side, someone hit them with the hashtag.
Hashtag SSPod on Instagram.
And Twitter, and I still have to give you the Twitter username and password.
I thought you were running the Twitter, Matt.
I am, and I just post updates every now and then retweet people.
Perfect.
That's all I do. Hey, on today's episode, Michelle, you talked to a pediatric dietitian?
I did, yeah. A couple months ago now, but I know we've been saving that interview. Martha Ferstl, she's in Tucson, Arizona, and she's worked in different settings, but she's a pediatric dietitian, specifically in the NICU at a hospital in Tucson, and works hand in hand with a lot of speech therapists, especially with the itty-bitty babies and feeding. So she was great to talk to. I learned a lot talking to her, and I think it's pretty cool to learn from kind of our sister professions who we don't necessarily know a whole lot about, but we're going to see in different facilities that we work in.
That's pretty awesome. Also today, if you were to lose your hearing, which voice would you want in your head as your last voice? Also, we're going to look at a study about the effectiveness of a classroom vocabulary intervention and an audiologist who has decided to take the big step into politics. But I figured we'd start off with the big article, Michelle, you brought us to our attention, but has been blown up all over Facebook. ASHA is looking to develop a new certification program for SLPAs. I have no experience with the SLPAs because here in Ohio, we don't have any.
Well, I was very excited to see this because, as most of the listeners have heard, Matt and I, we went to grad school together, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but The only thing I remember hearing about SLPAs was probably one sentence which said, some states have SLPAs, we don't. And that's it.
Yep. I got in trouble on a Facebook group because I said, quote, why would you stop at an assistant? And then I was re-educated very quickly. And I do apologize for that statement because that was Matt Hott a couple years ago. And I didn't understand the difference in assistants versus SLPs because, like you said, we don't have them in the state.
Mm-hmm. And it really just is a state-by-state licensure right now. That's my understanding. I can only speak to where I've lived. So Ohio does not license them. Colorado does, but I did not run into them a whole lot when I lived out there. In Texas, they're utilized everywhere, especially in the schools and in privately owned clinics. I wouldn't say the hospitals as much just because of the heavy medical specialization that not even all SLPs are comfortable with. But it does depend on the state, and I worked with some incredible SLPAs, and most of them had a bachelor's in speech or a related field and then did clinical hours to obtain that state licensure. But I think it would give some validity to the career of an SLPA because you're going to have the backing of a certificate from ASHA now, and it would also allow them to hopefully more easily maybe transfer between states because they're pretty limited as to what states they're allowed to work in right now. And then they have different credentials required in different states depending on what that licensing board requires. So having that national one. And I'm not an SLPA, so I'd love to hear from any listeners that are. But my other thought too is for insurance reimbursement. I know there are insurances that will not reimburse for services provided by assistants. And I wonder if that might change if there is an ASHA certificate.
Michael, does PA have assistants?
I believe it does. From what I've read, it's quite big out here, but I myself have not encountered that in my time here.
I know here in Ohio, when you're talking about the Medicaid changing or whatever with paying of the assistants, I think there was a deal with the OTs and PTs where they weren't paying as much or they didn't pay for the assistants doing it, and a lot of assistants lost their jobs because the school district decided that they'd rather pay a full-time OT or PT. Here's my concern about assistants, and this is, again, coming from somebody that works in a state that doesn't have an assistant. We're already either just making enough or underpaid for our services based off of what you would look at in the other rest of the medical field. Right now, we are in a position where we are wanted for jobs. We could pretty much move anywhere we want to get jobs and find jobs. Usually. I mean, if you want to work in Columbus, Ohio, you might have to work on the outskirts of Columbus because everyone wants to be there, at least here in Ohio. With ASHA credentialing assistants, it worries me that in states like Ohio, we're going to allow assistants come in, and then that's going to cut down on jobs, or it's going to cut down on pay because if I can pay an assistant at 70% of what I can pay a SLP, well, that SLP job is now going to get harder to pay or find, and there's going to be more competition for the limited number of SLP jobs.
And I mean, I think I understand where you're coming from.
So I'm very selfish.
No. I'm curious if states like Ohio who don't currently license them will even bother licensing them. Like, are they going to change that because ASHA decides to certify them? I don't know. That's a great question to ask. But,
I could call Greg Thornton, but I think he's asleep right now.
Oh,
Greg Thornton is the executive director of the Ohio Speech Board.
But I do think it does give validity to people who have chosen that career path. And, PTAs and COTAs are a lot more common, I guess. And
True.
I heard this analogy once that an assistant is supposed to be, say you have that large caseload. There could be a benefit as well to having an assistant, Matt. If you had an assistant working at your school, now you as an SLP could narrow down your treatment caseload and basically have extra arms. Like, you're still approving that SLPA's treatments, but could that be a benefit to you? I don't know. It totally depends. And it depends on school districts. It depends on all different settings. But the analogy I heard was that an assistant is really supposed to be an extension of the SLP. Because they're not diagnosing.
My only counter to that would be to contact your senators and congresspeople in your state to have them change the law so that your caseload isn't crazy and out of control like it is in Indiana or Arizona or a couple other states that I don't know, but I've heard horror stories of 150, 200 kids. And then
That's
you don't
insane.
need assistance. What'd you say, Mike?
That's insane.
Yeah, I was on Facebook on one of the groups, and I want to say it was one of the plain states. So Montana, maybe? And someone was saying that she had almost 200 kids with assistants. So she was in charge of the 200 kids, but the assistants were seeing those children. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, what's the jobs like out in Pennsylvania if you guys have assistants?
That's the vast majority of the jobs out here seem to be like contracting jobs, like 1099 contracting jobs. So I think that's what I see when I log on to like Indeed and things like that. So I think SLPAs are certainly, I don't think they're allowed to do all of the treatment themselves. I think they're allowed to help with paperwork and therapy planning and things like that. But in terms of the actual treatment, I think you need to be a CCC.
Oh, okay.
And so that is in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and everyone is different right now because I know in Texas they absolutely do treatment. They can't diagnose and they can't change plans of care or write goals, but they can help track goals and do treatments. But then there's, I don't know the exact divide, but they don't have training on dysphagia.
Right.
And I don't think they have training on fluency. So there are certain things that they're unable to treat, but the big thing is they can't diagnose.
I mean, I see the point of SLPAs, and I'm sure that if I worked with an SLPA, my opinion would be changed completely. But I just look at it from the selfish side of how does this affect my checkbook and bank account? And I see the writing on the wall that if ASHA gives the credentialing to the SLPAs in 10, 20 years, right, as I'm looking to get out of the field, there may be more SLPAs than SLPs, and that could affect our pay. I don't know.
Yeah,
That sounds very selfish, and I'm okay with that.
That's okay. And I had no experience with them before working with assistants in Texas. And I think that that's the same argument I remember hearing from friends in the medical field when they first introduced physician assistants.
Well, that's a good point. Still, we still need doctors, and I love my PA, by the way. Just
see, there you go.
That. Okay, all right. Maybe I'm just an idiot. I'll take that.
No. I mean, I think it obviously is being looked at by ASHA, and
I'll ask the business owner in the room, Michael.
What's up?
If you had the choice, and SLPAs were sanctioned by ASHA, and the rule changed that they could do treatment in Pennsylvania, would you hire an SLPA at 70, 75%, or would you pay a SLP at the 100% rate, whatever that would be?
I would pay the SLP at the 100% rate.
Michael not taking my totally misleading and drawn out question and prove me wrong. All right,
100%. When it's outpatient private therapy, you got to go with the skilled therapist.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yep.
That makes sense to me because you're paying for almost they're paying a premium out of pocket for private therapy.
Did you guys see the thing that blew up on Facebook about speech therapy and the SLPAs? So I guess there was an SLP that was selling shirts that just said, I'm a speech therapist, or I'm a speech therapist, ask me, or speech therapist make you talk, something that said, basically made it look like the person that's wearing it was a speech therapist. And there was a big hubbubaloo about allowing SLPAs to buy the shirt because the other SLPs did not feel it was right that an SLPA would wear a shirt that said, I'm a speech therapist.
But they are. And
right?
They're not speech language pathologists. They're doing therapy.
I was like about to comment, and I think we talked about it last week where I wrote it out and I went, Control Alt Delete.
Backspace.
Yep. Just Control Alt Delete it. I'm just going to get out of that one.
I really want to hear from someone who is an SLPA or maybe is an SLP who used to work as an SLPA. And I know some of them are listening because some of them were coworkers of mine in Texas.
And if you think I'm an idiot, it's okay. You can say I'm an idiot. 614-681-1798 or email speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com or directly to Michael and Michelle. #SSPod. I feel like the old man on the podcast where I've already admitted, like, no, I don't check Instagram because I don't know how that works.
I don't know. You've got some credit in your corner, though, because you started a podcast.
I opened up a microphone and said, I'm talking now. I still say that the power to make changes is in the legislative body. And that is the transition I'm going to use to talk about this article out of the ASHA leader. An audiologist applied her communication skills to be a political career. I think this is awesome. I think that any time that we can step out of our roles as an SLP, as an audiologist, as an SLPA, or anyone that works in the therapies, and become the person that's making rules and changes in your state, I think that's awesome. This is Deanna Frazier. She's an audiologist. She's also a member of the Kentucky House of Representatives, representing District 81. Guys, do you have any ounce of you that wants to be a politician?
I mean, Matt, you definitely asked us this before, and I want to know when you're running for office. I'm bouncing back the question to you.
Michael, I'll let you answer before I do.
I'll do it if you be my running mate.
So funny enough that you say that. I have spearheaded a thing here in Ohio that we are working on for school SLPs to change the law here in Ohio. At least I'm going to start investigating how we do that. That currently it says school-based SLPs can have 80 students on their caseload at one time. And I am going to do my best to try to get that numbered back down to equal with PTs and OTs at 50. So I am dipping my toe in the political realm, not necessarily to run, but to be there.
That's fascinating. So PTs and OTs, it's only 50 in Ohio.
Yep. But SLPs are allowed 50. Or 80. I'm sorry, 80.
Do you know the reasoning for that?
That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm trying to investigate, to be honest. I don't know. I really don't know.
I distracted from the article, but back to our audiologist who is already in politics.
Deanna Frazier.
The state I'm living in. I mean, I think it's great. She says she ran for political office and won when she was elected last November.
I am trying to figure out where District 81 is.
If it's my district, I'm going to laugh.
Let's see. You guys talk while I read.
All right.
Michael, would you run for, like, legit, would you run for political office?
Yeah, why not? I would try it out.
There's a lot of reasons why not. That's why I was asking.
No, I would do it. I would definitely do it. I think it would be fun. I think it'd be interesting. I feel like I basically do that now anyway in terms of like outreach and marketing and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would definitely do that. I'd be happy to do it if I had the opportunity. Sure.
I'm hesitant to, but I feel like even our discussions about it, Matt, have made me more open to it, that I would consider it if the opportunity was there. Right now, I haven't lived somewhere long enough that I would feel comfortable running for office there.
I mean, in a couple of weeks, we have an interview that I was able to do with the Arizona State Superintendent. And she was an SLP, Kathy Hoffman. She was an SLP that stepped down of her role as an SLP and traveled the state and got some votes and won.
Wasn't Elizabeth Warren an SLP?
Undergrad.
Undergrad SLP. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
That counts.
I think she went for communication disorders and then became a politician and now running for president. Found it, guys. District 81, Representative Republican Deanna Frazier, Madison County. Are you near Madison County, Michelle?
You know, I'm going to have to look at a map of Kentucky and figure that out.
It's near Richmond?
I'm in Hardin County.
It's the home of Eastern Kentucky University.
Meade County. Nope, I'm not Eastern Kentucky. Sorry.
But still, you know what? more I do it, I'm like, oh, maybe I should do local township and maybe become something local or statey, because we need somebody that cares about our kids and cares about what we do in the therapy realm. And I really feel like most of the people that are elected have no idea what we do.
I agree with that.
Nobody has any idea.
That's true.
Even a lot of the parents we work with have no idea what we do.
Or teachers.
You mean you do more than work on stuttering and R's?
Exactly.
True story. I call patients to schedule for home health care, and I'm not picking on any of my patients, but I'll say, hey, I'm Matt from blank, and I'm the speech and language pathologist. And they're like, I talk fine. I'm like, well, so you know how you choke? I'm supposed to help with that. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm waiting for the guy that does that to call me. And I'm like, I'm that guy. And the person will always be like,
that's me.
Why don't you lead with that? And I'm like, well, because you don't want to hear me say I'm the speech, language, memory, cognition, executive functioning dysphagia pathologist.
Exactly. Well said.
I wish you would introduce yourself as that when you call someone all in one breath, Matt.
Coming up after the break. What'd you say?
Everything's about language. Everything's about language.
Funny you say that. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about the effectiveness of classroom vocabulary intervention, and we're going to talk about which voice would you like to hear if it was the last voice you could ever hear before going deaf. But before we do that, we want to hear from you. Head over to our website, speechsciencepodcast.com, and from there, text us 614-681-1798 or call us on the same number, 614-681-1798, or email us speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com. Someone tell them how to find us on the social media.
#SSPod. My mic was muted. Sorry.
What is our Instagram account, by the way?
Speech_science.
There we go. Or Speech Science PC on Twitter. I do know that.
Oh, podcast.
Got it. See, not politically correct. Podcast. All right, we'll be right back. You're listening to Speech Science.
Do you have an idea for a product or book? Or are you ready to go beyond in-service presentations? Well, how do you get started? And what if you don't have any business experience at all? Well, I have some great news for you. I'm Mei-Ling Chan, and I'm getting the nitty-gritty stories from parents, teachers, therapists, advocates, and people with disabilities who have created successful businesses, and they're sharing their intimate stories with you. Listen to us on the Exceptional Leaders Podcast and fast-track creating and building and sharing your idea with the world so that you can help more people.
This is Michelle, and you are listening to Speech Science. And today I have the opportunity to sit down with a dietitian friend of mine. She lives in Tucson, Arizona. Her name is Martha Ferstl. I said that right, correct? All right, Martha Ferstl. And I also knew her before her last name was Ferstl, so I just about messed that up again. But Martha Ferstl, she has a master's degree. She is an RD, so that's a registered dietitian, and LD, which is a licensed dietitian. So Martha, if you can, first off, just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am, as you said, a dietitian. I have been a dietitian, it'll be 10 years in September. I started out, as all dietitians do, getting a bachelor's degree. Mine is in food science and human nutrition, but every dietitian's in some sort of foods and nutrition type realm. And then I went on and got a master's degree in foods and nutrition. And my master's was combined with my internship, which to be a dietitian, you have to do an internship that is accredited and organized through our governing body, as it were. So mine was combined with my master's degree. And after that, I started working as a dietitian. I moved to Denver, Colorado, and worked for WIC, the program for women, infants, and children, as a dietitian. And then I worked in dialysis with adults for several years. And then I moved into dialysis with children and other types of kidney diseases in little kiddos. And pretty much have been working in pediatrics more or less since then. Now I work in Tucson at Tucson Medical Center. in the neonatal intensive care unit. So with the little tiny babies, dealing with their nutrition and growth and vitamins and minerals and all that kind of fun stuff.
That's awesome. You've had a wealth of experience in multiple states and with young and old.
Yes, all the ages.
So I would say, I know with speech pathology, we always call it a lifetime sort of profession, right? That we work with 0 years old to the lifespan. And I think that's pretty similar with dietetics.
Yes, for sure. And it's similar as well. I feel like in speech therapy, you guys are kind of starting out with the little tiny babes to deal with maybe if they have feeding issues and whatnot, all the way up till the end where, you know, their issues change, but sometimes they're sort of similar with like swallowing issues and things. And for us, it's, you know, similar and different. The little kiddos, you're trying to get them to kind of grow and follow certain things like growth curves and such. And then at the other end, obviously you're not trying still to grow a 95-year-old person, but they have the issues that kind of correlate with the issues they have with speech stuff like swallowing things. But they tend to lose weight as they get older. They don't eat as well. Maybe they don't have someone to help them with meals or getting food and things like that. So we see some issues that develop just strictly related to old age, which I feel like is similar to what you guys see with older adults as well.
And you mentioned in your intro there, you spoke about your training and internship. What is that requirement? Is that part of your education or is that after you graduate?
Yes and yes. So it's required of every person that wants to be a registered dietitian, which means that you're registered through the Commission of Dietetic Registration, is the official CDR, yeah. You are not eligible to apply for an internship until you've finished your bachelor's degree. So you have to at least have a bachelor's degree that is accredited with that program. You can't just go to like any school and like study some nutrition. You have to have a bachelor's degree that's with a school that's been accredited through that program that says, yes, you've learned everything you need to learn to be able to go into the internship program. And the internship programs vary a bit, but I think they're anywhere from like 9 months or to a year, something in that realm. And they're all over the country. And you basically find out, you know, kind of look through all the different options that are available and you apply to them. And it's kind of a matching system, for lack of a better way to explain it. It's similar to the way they match for like med schools or for residencies. That's a big deal. And for doctors, they do their like match day for their residency. And it's similar to that, where you apply to several and then rank them, like here's my top 5. And then the people who take in applications, they rank their applicants. And then based on that, they match everybody up nationwide. So everyone in the country finds out at the same time what internship they've matched with. And then once they've completed their internship, then they're eligible. Well, you pass your internship, you're eligible to take the RD exam, the registered dietitian exam. And that's a nationwide exam. So you take that exam and pass it, then you are a registered dietitian with the ability to practice in any state in the United States. And then state by state, certain places require licensure as well. So then there's an additional step to practice in whatever state you live in.
That's been a recent topic on our podcast for reciprocity, and for myself, moving state by state with licensure, having to reapply. And it sounds like you've done that yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Is there any compact or reciprocity? I know nursing and I think OT have a compact between some states. Does dietetics have that?
I'm trying to think of, not in any of the states I've lived in.
Of course not, right?
Right, I know. And there's actually a couple of states, I think it's either 3 or 4 left, that don't have licensure for dietitians, which seems like, oh, that's a lot easier, but actually ends up being more of a pain because some companies require licensure. So I worked for a company that required licensure while living in a state that didn't have licensure, and actually had to get a license from a different state, which was so bizarre.
Really interesting.
Like an out-of-state license. It was like a state I'd never lived in, so it's really strange. But yeah, some like national companies that are headquartered in different places, if they're headquartered in a place that has licensure, they usually require all of their RDs to be licensed, even if they're in a non-licensure state. So it's like a kind of weird thing, but I'm trying to think if there's any, there probably are, but no states that I've lived in have that. We do have reciprocity agreements with some countries though, which is kind of fun. Basically saying that like the training and stuff that we have gotten here is equivalent to the training that they do in their countries. And if I wanted to move there, or someone wanted to move from there to the US, their credentials would follow them. They wouldn't have to sit down and take the RD exam. They would still have to get licensed in whatever state they wanted to practice in, but they could use their credentials there. So off the top of my head, I want to say it's the UK, Ireland, Australia, I think Canada, maybe. 100% sure on Canada. But there's a few of those, which is kind of cool too, but you could internationally.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I'd love the opportunity to work overseas if it ever happened.
Yeah.
What is the difference between when someone says nutritionist versus dietitian or some other name, these health gurus or anything else out there?
Someone left me a voicemail recently wanting to talk to the nutritionalist.
Nutritionalist, okay.
Dietitionalist in the voicemail. And I was like, sir, you're just making up words now. So there's a pretty big difference most of the time. Occasionally people use the words because they don't know the difference. The social worker I work with calls me a nutritionist all the time. And then she realizes that it's wrong and she changes it. But a lot of times it's just people not knowing exactly the right word to use. However, there are lots of people that refer to themselves as a nutritionist, and you will generally not meet a lot of dietitians who would refer to themselves as that. So those people are definitely telling you a different credential. So dietitians all have to be trained in basically the way I said, with having the bachelor's degree first and then applying to the internship. A lot of us also have an additional degree, whether it's a master's or a PhD. There is some talk about whether they want to require dietitians starting at a certain year moving forward to all have to have a master's degree before applying to the internship. So that might be heading in that direction. But still, all of that is kind of accredited through the same governing body. And it is specific in terms of what is taught and what is trained. Dietitians work in tons of different areas, but we're trained in several different areas. So we do training in hospitals, we do training in community service type of areas, such as like I did some training in a senior center, also in a WIC office. We also do training for food service, school nutrition, like all of these different areas. Whereas a nutritionist, technically it doesn't, the title doesn't apply to anything specific. So you can say you're a nutritionist. Your child could say he's a nutritionist. Anyone can say they are, because there's no official sort of thing that decides what it is. There's nobody saying this is what a nutritionist is. It's just a big term, basically. So a lot of times people will maybe get like a certificate or do some kind of like class at some place that's like, oh, I took a nutrition class. And then they sort of market themselves as a nutritionist and they want to give out nutrition advice. We're not generally huge fans of that because it can be dangerous.
Understandably, yeah.
Because people are minimally trained. Now, could the average person sit down with someone and be like, hey, you should stop eating a bunch of junk food and drinking like gallons of soda a day, and maybe you should like exercise? Yes, the average person can give that information. However, we see patients with medical diagnoses and various things that what they do nutritionally could have a huge impact on their health, and honestly, as dire as it sounds, living or dying. For example, I had a patient who's on dialysis, When you're on dialysis, your kidneys are not regulating the things that are in your bloodstream correctly. So certain things can go way up or way down, and they're really dangerous. One of those is potassium. If you eat a lot of potassium, your kidneys aren't processing that out. The dialysis machine has to do that, but you still have to be really careful with what you eat. And I had a patient who went to his doctor, his medical doctor, and the doctor said, hey, you should take this multivitamin. This would be a great thing. And it was like a powdery stuff that you added to, I don't know, water. And so fortunately, he brought it to me first before he took it, because he thought I should check and make sure this is okay for someone who's on dialysis. And it had so much potassium in it. I was like, please don't take that. Don't do that. And I actually talked to the doctor, and he said, well, vitamins are great for everyone. This is a great idea. And I said, but it's not for this person. He's on dialysis. And he said, oh, and he pulled out a notepad and he said, who else would this not be good for? Like, he's getting ready to write stuff down. And I said, this is the reason that if you're not really trained in this, maybe you shouldn't deal with this, because it's not super safe. And that was sadly a medical doctor, but that's what we see from nutritionists kind of across the board, is that they kind of give out generic information just based on like, hey, here's some healthy concepts, like this is healthy in general, so it's healthy for you, but that's not always the case for people. And so it can be kind of dangerous. And different states and their licensure laws actually are in place to help curtail that, so that people without appropriate training aren't giving out information that can be dangerous to the public. And in those states, if someone is doing that, you can actually like, not sue them, but you can kind of like report them to the governing body of dietitians or whomever is in charge of it. In states without licensure, there's sort of no recourse, because there's no one overseeing them to make sure they're practicing in a safe manner. So Colorado, where I was for 8 years, they don't have licensure there. And there's a pretty large number of people who practice as nutritionists there who often fight against the licensure. Then they're concerned that the dietitians are going to kind of take their jobs. But we generally don't do anything similar to what they do. So it's kind of a weird thing that has been an ongoing fight for, 15 years or so. But it's typically, we're trying to make sure that people are getting safe information and they're not going to be made sick from it. And the people who are made sick from it end up coming into the hospital. They don't generally go back to their nutritionist who gave them that information. So we see them when they're sick in the hospital, and we are the ones who kind of pick up the pieces and fix it. And it's frustrating for us, because we're not the ones that cause the problem, and the ones that cause the problem don't have any repercussions from it. So
and that's just like you said, a good argument for the importance of licensure. I know as speech pathologists, sometimes we get frustrated too with that licensure piece in different places, but those licenses can also protect us as professionals for what our niche and our professional skill set is.
Yeah, I mean, the license is in place to protect the professional and also to protect the patients. And as you guys, I'm sure, do, just like we do, we have continuing education things, and we have to keep our registration status current. Like, I can't just take my test. What year did I take my test? 2009. Took my test, and like, that's it. I never learn anything else. If I don't keep up my continuing education, my registration status goes away, and I would have to retake my test. I have to keep up on, newest developments and research and things like that. So we're continually learning and educating ourselves. And that's a requirement for, pretty much every medical profession. Everybody does that. Nurses, doctors, speech therapists, physical therapists, everybody has that. But that's something that's good for us, as we know that we're, on top of things and learning all the newest stuff that's coming out. But that's also good for patients and patient care, because they know that the most up-to-date evidence-based, research medicine is being practiced with them. So.
Yeah. And so this is a silly question, but I noticed that you write dietitian spelled Dietian, and I've also seen it spelled with that C. Is there a difference?
Yes, one is correct and one is not.
Okay, well, tell us which one's correct.
So in the United States, there's no C in it. In other English-speaking countries, the UK, for example, they spell it with the C. Here it's spelled with a T, which I know seems really dumb and who cares, but it actually, that's how it's like trademarked, is with the T. So like in the United States, it's just technically not spelled that way. So it's really just a location based.
So you as an RD, it is dietitian with 2 T's.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And I have had that changed. Like when I started working at a hospital that I worked at in Denver, it was with a C, and I asked my boss if she could change it. And she said, the last dietitian never mentioned it. And I said, yeah, she noticed it though. She just didn't say anything, but can you change it so that my badge reads correctly? And also I don't want that on my business cards.
And so it matches your licensure too. That's important.
Exactly. And that's how it is written out on there. And it's also the like RD, the letters and the term, it's trademarked with the T in it. Not that anyone would ever be like, oh, you know what, they spelled this wrong in here, so I guess you're not actually falling under this appropriate governing body. But technically speaking, that's what it is. And so I like to make sure that's what it is.
Hey, I'm okay with that. Words and language have importance, and you want to make sure it matches up. And as a speech pathologist, I hope that anyone listening to, that we can make sure that we are writing our referrals correctly too, if we're sending someone to a dietitian, an RD, not a nutritionist.
Yes. And whatever dietitian you are sending them to, we'll so appreciate it if you write RD or if you write dietitian out, especially if you spell it with a T. They will be so excited. You'll be
I'll win some brownie points with all my dietitians I work with.
Yes.
So on a fun side, what made you want to become a dietitian?
Well, I started out my schooling like most dietitians do in civil engineering.
Perfect.
Because I really liked math and science, and both of my grandfathers are engineers, and I was like, cool, they seem to love it. One of them worked for companies that worked with NASA to do all kinds of stuff during the space race, which I thought was the coolest thing ever, and I wanted to be cool like him. And so I went to school for that, and my first year of undergrad was in civil engineering, and I hated it. I liked generally, yes, math and science, but I really hated engineering, and I was really sad about it because I was so excited about the concept. And as just a fun like elective, I took a nutrition class, not like one that people were taking who were majoring in foods and nutrition or anything like that. It was just a like, yay, people are taking an elective nutrition class. But a dietitian taught it, and I really, really liked it. And I went and sat down with the counselor people at school and was like, hey, I don't like engineering. What are some other options? And they had me take this little personality test thing that I thought was pretty cool. And at the end, it, spits out here's 20 job fields or whatever your personality and your interests kind of match with. And dietitian was on that as well. And I was thinking, man, I don't know anything about this. I don't know what these people do, but I am taking a class from one and it's really interesting. And now this is popping up on here. Maybe I should look into it and consider it. And I did. And then I switched over to nutrition. So.
And never looked back.
It was kind of a roundabout, weird way to get there.
Hey, but you're there and you seem to be enjoying it.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, have you had a chance in the different settings you've worked in, have you worked closely with speech pathologists?
Yes. Kind of depending on where I worked, that's more or less. In dialysis, I know that we would refer people to various therapies, but dialysis clinics themselves don't have, none of the where I worked had it, maybe other places do, but we have a dietitian and we have a social worker, but we don't have any therapies. But I know we would often refer people to them. So not as much there, but definitely in a hospital setting and very, very much in pediatrics. I also worked at, I guess I kind of forgot about this earlier. I worked at a nursing home in Colorado Springs where I met Michelle. She wasn't, but she was living in Colorado Springs as well.
I did do some PRN at that nursing home.
True. But you weren't living there. This is
true. That was not my place of residence.
so yeah, I definitely worked with them in that capacity. But certainly in the hospitals that I worked at, it's been huge. I mean, currently I work in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit, and I talk with them at least once a day, often more. I text with them a lot. I got a text from one at like 7 p.m. on Thursday, and she's, sorry, it's so late. I just have this one quick question for you. So I work with them a ton because we have babies who are born before the age that they're developmentally ready to actually physically eat by mouth. So we have to feed them through a feeding tube most of the time. Sometimes we have to feed them through their veins, but we have them in the hospital, you know, as they're growing and getting older, and they eventually hit the point where they can developmentally understand how to eat. And that's when the SLPs step in and start working with them and developing those feeding skills. And they talk to me a lot about their growth. What are we feeding them? Because they do a lot of direct feeding with the babies, they'll say, you know, I was feeding him and he was really uncomfortable. He seemed really gassy, like something was going on with his stomach. Do we think we need to change what we're feeding him? Because they don't determine, you know, what the babies are eating. They're figuring out how to best get them to eat. But if they seem like they're really uncomfortable or something when they're eating, then they talk to me a lot about like, what can we change something? What can you do? Or mom's worried about this, or we've noticed this. So we interact a lot because those are kind of the two components of what they're eating and how we can actually get them to learn to eat and get them to eat that, because that's a requirement of leaving the NICU and going home, is that they have to be able to eat and gain weight. So we kind of work together on that basically every day. So.
Wow. And have you had any negative experiences working with SLPs?
Personally, no, I haven't. I have always had great experiences. I've heard occasionally like, oh, this person's pushy or what have you, but no, not really. I think because I've always known like, here's my boundary and here's where I need you guys to come in. I have definitely interacted with dietitians who I think feel really comfortable with stuff where they feel like, oh, I could deal with certain things like textures of foods or consistency of like liquids, where they think they can kind of deal with a person with that type of thing. I am very, very well aware of the fact that I am in no way trained to do the things that an SLP does. So I'm very comfortable being like, here's my line, I am at it, this is yours, you take this over. So I think generally SLPs are happy to know that like, I know where my part is and I know where their part is, and I'm never trying to cross into that because I don't know how and I don't want to try.
So you sound like the ideal multidisciplinary team member, right? That
I just do
you
my
can
part.
really, yeah, but really feed off of each other and help each other.
Well, and I know that, I mean, one, it's outside of my scope of practice. So like, realistically speaking, it's not appropriate for me to try to do something that's in an SLP scope of practice. But two, I know my scope of practice very well. And I know that if I ask an expert to come in and do their scope of practice, it'll be fantastic compared to me like bumbling around and being like, oh, I don't know, we could thicken some liquid. I don't know how to do that. I don't want to try, and I don't want to be part of it because it's not safe for anyone.
What is the hardest part of being a dietitian?
Ooh, I would say it's a little bit variable depending on what you do. Generally speaking, as a dietitian, so I went to school for 6 years, and then I did an internship in addition to that. So you do a lot of training, but everyone eats. So everyone is an expert on food. And while that's sort of true in a sense that, like, for example, people will say, you know what, for whatever reason, my body doesn't do well with this specific food, so I don't eat it. Cool. You know that about yourself. Do that. Don't eat it. Or there's certain foods you don't like, whatever. That's fine. But what I find is that because everyone eats, everyone feels that they have a bigger knowledge of food and nutrition than they do. And so there's a lot of us trying to kind of break through all the things that people don't know, or that they think they know, and trying to sort of re-educate. And that's across the board. That includes people in the medical field who maybe have zero training but are medical experts, so they'll pretend like they have a lot of training. For example, physicians. I feel like I'm kind of ragging on physicians. I really like them, but like two bad examples about doctors. But doctors, generally speaking, take a nutrition course in medical school, or none. Some physicians are interested in it, and they go out of their way to get more training and find out more information about it. I worked with a lot of really good physicians who, kind of similar to myself, know their line and their limit. They know, I don't know anything about this piece. That's why I have this dietitian here. Worked with a nephrologist who was amazing about that. As soon as people would start asking her nutrition related questions, she was like, great, here's my dietitian. I'm not going to try.
And for everyone listening, can you tell us real quick, nephrologist is?
Sorry, a kidney doctor.
Okay.
So yes, and the kidneys, it's a lot of nutrition related things, but she would never try to answer this question. She would always defer that to me. And if someone would ask me like medication questions, I'm deferring back to her. So it was a good relationship. But there's a lot of physicians who kind of figure, well, food, we all eat it. I know stuff about food. Yeah, I can tell you things about food, and I can deal with this nutrition type stuff. So probably the thing that frustrates dietitians the most is people who are giving nutrition related information to patients who are not qualified to do so, because if it is incorrect, it's really hard to balance giving the correct information to the patient without sort of undermining their trust in that care provider, because that person might still be a really great nurse, doctor, whatever it is that they do, but they're not great at sort of dabbling in nutrition. And so you have to kind of find that line between hey, sorry they gave you not quite right information, but they're still probably really great at all the other stuff they do, but let me give you the right information. So we try really hard to make sure that people are getting information that is accurate and that is safe for them in whatever health condition or whatever they have, while sort of getting rid of the other information that they've gotten that maybe isn't accurate, to include things from Men's Health magazine and blogs that people see online. I've had people be like, oh, I read this in this magazine that I should, what? Just some like random journalist. And cool, I'm glad they're interested in general health things. And again, like I said, with nutritionist kind of things, like general health stuff, yeah, most people could give out a general health information, but patients that you're seeing at a hospital, they have some type of either chronic illness or acute illness that they need a specific thing for. And so that general health stuff doesn't apply to everyone. And so that's where you're trying to sort of weed out that other stuff and give them the actual information they need. So we spend a lot of time fighting through the weeds, as it were, and it's a little bit frustrating. It's a little different in the NICU, but that's kind of the general thing that I would say is most frustrating for dietitians.
I think a lot of SLPs can empathize with that in some ways, especially in the medical settings, of feeling a little bit of that encroachment. I know that's a topic with our national board too, of trying to make sure other professionals know what our lane is and where we overlap and where we can support each other. What is, flip side of the hardest part, what is your favorite part, the thing that makes you go to work every day?
I would say currently, I really like working in pediatrics, and now I'm working with these tiny babies, which one of the things that they have to do in order to be safe to go home to their parents is that they need to grow and they need to get bigger and be kind of at a safe size to go home. And that's my job. So basically I'm taking babies who are born a pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds, and getting them to a weight that they're kind of safe to go out into the world. And what's neat about that is that you're kind of at the beginning where you're sort of helping to build up this little person. That I like doing that because it's a little bit different than when you're dealing with adults. You're sort of doing like disease management and kind of trying to clean up some issues that people maybe have, like over the past 50 years, they've developed certain things or chronic conditions or whatever. And with the baby, you're basically starting from scratch and you're kind of making them into this little healthy little being. And it's really, as I said, I went into civil engineering because I really liked math and science. It's really heavy math. I do obscene amounts of calculations a day, which I like doing. My mom always jokes that nobody uses algebra after high school or after college because nobody uses it in their job. I use it about 17 times an hour. So there,
dietitians too.
I do so much math. So I get to do all this math, but basically, studies have been done to figure out exactly what babies of certain sizes and certain ages need. And I figure out how to get them all of those things. So all of the macronutrients and micronutrients that they need to grow correctly. And then because they're in the hospital for a long time often, and we weigh them every day and we're watching them every single second of every day, I can see exactly how it's working and change things if it's not working quite right, which most of the time dietitians will make recommendations or changes to what a patient's, either their diet or kind of what they're doing, their regimen, and then you don't see them, or it takes months for the change to kind of make any impact. But for these tiny little babies, it's like a day or two. And so you can really see the change happening in front of your face, and it's kind of awesome. Even like there's certain labs, we follow all their lab values, but there's certain lab values that are super important nutritionally speaking. And, something will be like really high and out of whack, and then I make a change and then it comes back to normal and the doctors are like, hey, it worked, just what you did. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. So that part is really cool for me. I really enjoy that.
And to see that data and you can see the quick changes is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I think probably if you asked some of the other disciplines that work in the NICU as well, they would probably say the same thing. Some of our SLPs, they work in our NICU and they also work in, we have a NICU aftercare clinic. So for babies that were in our NICU with certain kind of diagnoses or certain gestational ages that they were born at, they're followed up in the aftercare clinic. So it's actually kind of cool. Our SLPs see them when they're first born and then later on up until age 2. But I know that they'll see them and then maybe they'll see them 6 months later or something. So they're not kind of following that constant progression. Whereas in the NICU, they get to see day to day how they make progression, how they change. Same with like the physical therapists that are in there. They can see day to day, hey, we did this, and now, their head's moving like this and whatever. So I think it's kind of cool for all of us to see the progression of the little changes that we make and how it changes day to day with the baby. It's kind of fun.
Now, switching topics just a little bit, I know recent news in speech pathology, especially those who work in feeding or dysphagia, have been talking a lot about the IDDSI, the International Dysphagia Diet Standardization Initiative. And have you had any experience with that yet? Implementing it in where you're working? I know NICU is a little different.
Yes, kind of. So I went to, I told you about this because I sent you some stuff from it, but I went to a pediatric nutrition conference in September at Chalk Children's, which is in Southern California. And they had their SLPs actually give a big talk about it and explained it all, which was super interesting because the majority of people at the conference, there was a few outliers, but it was mostly dietitians. So it was really nice for all of us to see that information and kind of learn about it directly from an SLP, and also reminded me of, wow, you don't know anything about this. This is why you don't deal with this stuff. But I thought it was interesting to see how kind of hard they'd work to standardize everything, which having the training and stuff that we do as dietitians, we do a lot of training in food service, which sounds like a vague term, but a lot of that is generally speaking the food service department of a kitchen, which is where they would be, they get the order of the patient's diet or liquid needs to be this consistency, but they're the ones that are kind of making it into that. And I've definitely seen at different places like, oh, this is sort of their version of that. This is their version of this food consistency or this texture or whatever. And I think it's awesome that someone's thinking, hey, wait, we should probably make this super standardized so that wherever a person goes, it's exactly the same. And safety wise, I think that's really awesome. It's definitely not something that our patients in the NICU don't eat food. They get breast milk.
Fair enough.
So it's a little bit different for us, and we don't like thicken anything in there. But I know that in terms of the consistency of it across the board, I think that is something that every dietitian that I've talked to about it, who's either read up on it or been at a presentation about it, was like, oh, this is so awesome that they're standardizing that. And I think it's super smart. And I've told you that I've been asked to do a talk about nutrition related to food textures and consistencies and things. And all I thought was, wonder if I can get that lady who gave that talk to just come and do the talk for me, because I'm not really an expert on this at all. But I definitely will use the information related to it. I'm talking about the nutrition part of it, but I think it's really good information for people to have, especially the people who are doing the work, the people who are creating food to that consistency, or they're thickening liquids and stuff, because a lot of times the people who are actually physically doing that are not people who've had tons of specialized training in it. Mm-hmm. So having something that just tells them this is exactly how it's supposed to be, I think will be beneficial safety wise in the long run.
And hopefully we can use the same terminology, because I've experienced that as well, where different settings, dysphagia level 1 means something different in this hospital versus this SNF. So I hope that it can be some positive change. And I think it's a great example of that multidisciplinary collaboration between ASHA and is it dietitian and nutrition, or what's it called?
It's called AND, Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics.
There we go. Okay. I'm like, I should know this.
I think that is a good point, though, because the terminology that's used in different places is different. Even if they're referring to the same things, they'll often use different words and different phrases, which is confusing. But also, yeah, I think standardizing that will be helpful. We noticed that with like different types of diets in a hospital, like one hospital calls it this, one hospital calls it that. And I don't mean like texture, consistency kind of thing, but like a diabetic diet or a diet for someone with like cardiac disease, like disease, that they call them different things, or they have different things. Like there's a lot of standardization that I think would be helpful facility to facility.
All right. My last question before I wrap up with you has 2 parts. Okay. But you've got an audience of speech pathologists right now on this podcast, right? So what would be one thing that you want SLPs to know about your profession, and one thing that SLPs can do to support RDs?
Ooh, okay. I'm going to answer the last one first. I think that it depends on the SLP. Obviously the ones I work with collaborate a lot with dietitians, but I've definitely met SLPs that don't generally collaborate with dietitians, or maybe don't even know where to start to collaborate with a dietitian. Like I need to refer someone, but I don't even know where to begin with that. I would encourage them to kind of figure that out, look into that in the area that they're in, because I know people who have worked with an SLP, and the SLP said, you really should see a dietitian, or they said nutritionist. So that would be important. Always say dietitian. But the family doesn't actually know where to turn to, where to look. And so maybe they're kind of looking themselves, and they're not necessarily getting someone who is, 1, an RD, or 2, kind of specialized in their area. So like if you work with pediatrics, you should have kind of your go-to person that you would want to, or people that you would want to refer someone to, or encourage someone to go see, so that you know that the person is going to see a dietitian who has experience and training in pediatrics, so that they're not just sort of grasping at straws. Say, I know when people are trying to find a dietitian in the community, sometimes they're just sort of not sure where to find them. If you are an SLP and you're looking for like, where would I find a dietitian in my community? The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics website has listings on there And then also usually state organizations, which are typically the name of the state, and then that, like Colorado Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, Arizona Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. It's generally just like the state added on. If you look on their website, they usually have people listed on there, or like where you can find people. So that's helpful. So that's my answer to that part. I'm trying to think of, ask me the first one again so that I say it right to you.
That's okay. What would be one thing that you want SLPs to know about dietitians?
It's hard because all the SLPs I work with are really awesome, and like collaborating with the dietitians that work with them. But I guess the thing that I would most recommend would be, one, I'm sorry if you've worked with a dietitian that has overstepped his or her bounds into SLP world, because I swear that we don't all do that, and I apologize for that if anyone has. But
we apologize for any SLPs if they've overstepped it too.
Good, I'm glad we cleared the air on that. But two, I've definitely, because outside of my professional world, I know several SLPs, and I know that they have at times felt sort of frustrated in the sense that they felt like they had to sort of do both things. Like they're trying to figure out how to get a patient, like how this patient can eat, but they're also trying to figure out, you know, what they can eat or what they should eat or how much they should eat, or how, if it's a child, like how much they should be growing, or they're kind of trying to do parts of a dietitian's job, maybe not necessarily like on purpose, but because they're being asked that in their job, or the family is asking them that, or something along those lines. So my thought on that would be use your resources. Like don't feel like you have to do a dietitian's job or be part of that, even if where you work doesn't have a dietitian. I would either reach out. I've gotten calls from people that I don't work with, Michelle, asking questions about patients, like, you know, I have a patient that's this age and this size, how much should they be growing? Or I have a child, this, you know, just asking questions like that. You know, kind of use your resources and reach out to those things. Dietitians are happy to help with that, because it takes 2 seconds for me to tell someone this is how much a child of this age and this size should be eating, or how much they should be growing, and that information that's going to take you a really long time to find. So don't feel like you can't reach out to someone. And if it seems like you're being asked over and over and over again to do something that a dietitian should be doing, or something that you're like, I'm not really trained in this, yeah, maybe you guys do need a dietitian, or you need to talk with your supervisor about, you know, your scope of practice and your comfort level in doing things that are kind of outside of that, and make your life a little easier, not trying to do things that you really don't need to be doing.
Then asking questions, right? The ask for help when we need it, and know what our skill set is.
Yes, for sure. I was recently asked to tell the physician what type of food, long confusing story, but this baby should have. And I said, I can tell you what food. I cannot tell you the consistency of that food. I don't know what is safest for her to swallow at this juncture, at this age of her life. And the doctor looked at me like I was insane. And I said, I will talk to Danielle, that's one of our speech therapists. And I said, I will tell her the type of food, and then she has to take it from there, because I don't know what is safe for this baby to swallow. And I am not going to even pretend to try to get a baby who has cystic fibrosis to give her something that she could potentially aspirate into her lungs and get a lung infection from, which, if if you know anything about cystic fibrosis, that's going to be the story of her life. She's going to have a ton of lung infections, and I'm so not going to be the person that starts with that. But the doctor looked at me like I was crazy, but I was super firm, and that I did not want to be the person that determined what was going into that baby's mouth, the consistency, because I am not trained in that, and I do not know the appropriate thing for the baby of that age. And I immediately called the SLP and was like, cool, this is the food. You figure out how to get it in her, because I don't want to be part of that, because I'm not comfortable with that, and it's outside of my scope of practice. And she was perfect and took over, and everything was awesome. And she actually did that feed to make sure that it was the right consistency and all that kind of stuff, and that she could safely swallow it. But I feel like sometimes people think, oh, well, the doctor's asking me to do this thing, so I guess I have to do it. And I was having none of that, because I did not want to be the one to put up with that. But it was nice to know that there was someone who could do that, and that I didn't have to try to finagle it and figure it out in a way that would probably be unsafe, because I don't know anything about that.
Well, Martha Ferstl, I have very much enjoyed speaking to you and learning from your expertise too. I think it's a great lesson for us as speech pathologists to learn from our kind of neighbor professions and people that we're going to share offices or hallways or hospitals with and share patients with in various settings. So thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me and answer all my questions.
Certainly, anytime.
Martha Ferstl, who is a registered dietitian in Tucson, Arizona. So thank you, Martha.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Speech Science. I'm the guy that does no sticker charts and doesn't like playing games. I'm Matt Hott, joined by one of the hardest working SLPs I know, Michelle Wintering.
I love sticker charts and games.
Yeah, I figured you did. And the guy that I would want to be doing my speech therapy when I need it, Michael McLeod.
Oh, that was very sweet of you.
Oh, yeah, I assumed you wouldn't leave me.
That was a pretty good intro.
That was nice. That was nice.
I assumed he wouldn't leave me plugged in front of the TV. That's why I said that.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Hey, guys, question for you. How important is vocabulary to learning?
So important.
Essential.
I thought we talked about this before, the importance of classroom vocabulary. Have we not?
Of course we have.
Okay.
I'm sure we have. The last vocab really we talked about was reading based. You know what their vocabulary is, right? The word gap.
This one is a journal out of, this is an article out, or a study, I should say, out of the Journal of Speech, Language, and Hearing Research. It's by Hilary Lowe, Lucy Henry, and Victoria L. Jaffe. It's the effectiveness of classroom vocabulary intervention for adolescents with language disorder. This is one of those studies where you tuck it in the back pocket and you show your teachers why you're doing push-in therapy on vocabulary skills. They looked at the experimental interventions, and they saw improvement in the classroom if they target that classroom vocabulary. And I believe we've talked about this before, the importance of hitting certain types of vocabulary versus limited meaning words. Am I right?
Yes, you are definitely right about that. Really what this article really showed me was a lot of the students that I work with in terms of vocabulary is when they'll be in the classroom during a lesson or even during a social communication with a peer, when a word comes up they don't understand. If they hear a word, they don't know the definition of it, they don't know the meaning of the word, they can tend to get lost in the conversation and get hyper-focused on that word. And that's when anxiety and basically uncomfortness tend to increase. And that really decreases their ability to learn and their ability to function in an educational environment when their anxiety is increasing because they're so hyper-focused on what is this word? Why don't I know it? Why am I so stupid?
And I think it ties right into what we've discussed before on just the importance of exposure. You know, you're talking about them hearing these words and hearing them in different formats and formally and informally. So they compared what the 10 words taught through usual teaching practice, which I kind of want to know what they mean by that a little better. So that's probably defined further in the article. But and then 10 other words taught using this experimental intervention that embedded phonological semantic activities. So basically what we do as speech pathologists.
And and besides social communication, there's only so many varied vocabulary you're going to hear by having an informal conversation with a peer. There's only so much you're going to hear in terms of, this is not Dawson's Creek where people talk like they're on the SATs. So it's like there's only so much you're going to get from that. And how do you learn varied vocabulary, expansive vocabulary? It's most likely it's through reading. And that's a lot of what our generation did, was reading books and being exposed to vocabulary, reading it and understanding it in context. But I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that today's generation is reading less and less and less. Especially the population that is qualifying and is enrolled in speech therapy. I highly doubt the majority of them are reading independently on their own for pleasure. So they're not exposed to this varied vocabulary that they can use in social contexts. So when the therapist decides to push in or focus on vocabulary goals, they are remedying this issue by teaching them this vocabulary that otherwise they're simply not exposed to.
So you were asking about the teacher strategies. The top 4, they looked at the 27 different teachers and they ranked the top however they looked at them. The top 4 most frequently used strategies reported by the teachers were definition games, spelling, practical demonstration or experiments, and then they gave the definitions. And then the most frequently used strategies noted in lesson observations. So this is what it was observed, not what teacher reported. They list the keywords on the board, gave them definitions, and then give definitions through paraphrasing, and then having the teacher or the student repeat it multiple times before going into the reading. The experimental intervention looked at a self-rating checklist. So the students looked at how well they understood the vocabulary, then a visual image displayed with the written word, and then some word detective games were played. A word map was created, and then word-wise quickie. This is a short verbal activity in which students are given a word. They think of a meaning and think of a sound and use the word in a sentence. And then finally, a sound and meaning bingo, and then a keyword sheet.
So it seems like you got a lot more variety in that phonological based one, and you're tying in the phonological side, not just teaching the definition in the word or the spelling.
So this goes... Oh, I'm sorry, Michelle.
No, but I think it's really important because it's tying in reading. It's not just tying in the sight word part that we hear that debate too of this push for teaching sight words versus phonological based reading. And I know that's a whole nother discussion, but it seems like they kind of touched on that a little bit without meaning to.
I wish I remembered where I heard this. I was either at an Ohio Speech Language Hearing Association or an Ohio School OSpeak meeting, but a presenter talked about how typical students need 7 unique opportunities to learn a new vocabulary word. And our students that have disabilities may need 10 to 20 times that amount. So if a typical student needs 7 unique opportunities, a student with a language development or a language deficit or delay might need 70 to 140 unique opportunities with that word to use it and generalize it into other areas. And that kind of makes sense with this study where they looked at, 7 different experimental interventions.
That number 7 always seems to come up with things. I remember back in, I think it was Girl Scouts, learning about trails, how trails are developed, that it takes 7+ times of walking the same path to start to get that defined trail, which is kind of like, I guess we're creating that habit for people with learning a new skill, right?
A new synapse.
Yeah.
Mike, have you ever heard that 7 number before?
I have not, no.
See, I wish I knew who I did the study for. I've looked for it multiple times to try to get the research or the evidence to back up my claim, and I can't find that 7 anywhere because I learned it when I was a new SLP 8 years ago.
When your brain was being overloaded.
Yeah. Oh, we want to hear from you. What do you think of vocabulary? How do you handle the vocabulary? Head over to our website, speechsciencepodcast.com, or email us speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com, or give us a phone call, 614-681-1798.
Or text.
Text 614-681-1798. I think the next person that texts us, I am going to call them on air.
You should.
Unless that sounds like a threat, then don't do that. If that sounds like a threat, I won't do that to you. Guys, I have a very cool story here, but I want to ask you a question, a serious question. So you've already read the article. Don't use what's in this article. If you knew you were going to lose your hearing, what would be the last voice, or who would you want to hear before you lose your hearing for good?
Wow.
My son.
That's a good question.
Aww.
That's a good one.
Michelle says her son. I think I'd want my wife.
Okay. I
I love my boys, but I would want my wife. She motivates me.
I'd have to go with the same.
Your wife?
Yours.
Oh, my wife?
No, mine.
Matt Hot.
My voice. Yeah. Anyone want my voice as the last one? Well, this is a really cool story. San Diego Comic-Con happened just about a week and a half ago. And if you don't know what San Diego Comic-Con is, I forgive you for not being a giant nerd. It is the epicenter of the nerdom in the world. I was going to say America, but it's the world where TV shows and movies announce what's coming up for the next year. Marvel announced the next 10 movies. You get to meet your actors. And there was a little show that was super important to me as a kid, was the Batman, the animated series. Did you guys ever watch this?
I have, yes, of course I have.
The animated series, I believe I did a little bit with my brothers.
Yeah, the Joker was Mark Hamill from Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
But the voice of Batman is a man named Kevin Conroy. And he did a really cool interview I listened to about 5 years ago where he talked about Batman was the true person and Bruce Wayne was the mask to cover up the pain that created Batman. So Kevin Conroy is one of the greatest voice actors. Well, a man came up to him at San Diego Comic-Con, and Kevin says in the story, that we're going to have the link up in our show notes, that he was leaving and he made eye contact with this man. And he decided he was going to go over and shake this man's hand and give this man a hug. And his publisher was like, don't do that. Like, what are you doing? And so Kevin walks over and he starts to realize that the guy's like waving his hands and trying to get his like friend over, who he thinks is his friend. And Kevin very quickly realizes that the person with him is not a friend, it's the interpreter. And he finally realizes that this guy is deaf. So Kevin's like, how does a deaf guy know me as a voice actor? And he hugged the guy, and the guy shook his hand and put a letter in his hand. And Kevin went back to the hotel room and read it. And this man lost his hearing as a child. And the last voice he has in his head is Kevin Conroy as Batman telling him not to give up. I guess in one of the episodes, Batman was talking about not giving up and fighting through everything. And this man, for the last 20 years or so, has had Batman's voice in his head telling him not to give up. And now this guy watches the Batman, the animated series, with his son. And
that's beautiful.
That is such a cool moment that he was able to meet Batman and tell him this through a letter. And on Twitter, Kevin Conroy was super excited because I guess somebody else took a picture of that, and the guy tweeted it to Kevin Conroy, their hug. And he says he's got a letter for Mark Hamill as well, to give him as well. So that is so cool. The last voice he has in his head is Batman.
I love that they were able to connect, because that doesn't always happen.
No.
With a story like that.
So I don't know. That is just, I figured that would be a fun, uplifting story for tonight.
I like it.
Plus, it included San Diego Comic-Con and my favorite version of Batman, so I can't lose when it comes to this. Hey guys, guess what we did?
We did a whole episode.
We did episode 85. It is in the books. We are a high school kid with a learner permit away from being episode number 100.
Oh.
Now I got to bleep something out.
You can keep it. It's cool.
I'm bleeping it. I'm keeping this in too.
Keep it.
Guys, what are you doing this week? It is when we're recording this is July 30th. School starts up soon. What is going on with you all?
Just working as always.
Yeah, I mean, working here and getting some family time in, and we've got some visitors coming this weekend. to come visit us in Kentucky, high school friends of mine.
Nice.
So that will be fun.
I am doing some experiments with my boys this week that I promised that I would do earlier this summer, and we just never got around to it because we've been doing other goofy stuff. But I am going to teach my son how to suck a hard-boiled egg into a glass bottle of Coke. I am going to teach both my sons what happens when you mix Diet Coke and Mentos and Pepsi and a couple other things. And wait, when you looked at me like that, have you ever done the hard-boiled egg into a bottle of Coke?
I have not.
Michael?
Nope.
All right, so what you do, take a hard-boiled egg, deshell it. Then take a match and drop the match into the bottle. It has to be empty, by the way. A glass bottle is cooler, but you can do it with a 2-liter. And then you put the egg on top while the match is burning. As the match is burning up the oxygen, it's going to suck the egg into the pop bottle. And then when it burns out, the egg should right into the bottom of the bottle.
Wow.
It is a really cool experiment because you get to play with fire in a controlled way, and you get to see an egg get sucked into a bottle. It is so cool.
One of my favorites was lighting, like I had a teacher do with money, like a dollar bill. They did it with a $20 bill actually, but you soak it in rubbing alcohol, and then when you light it on fire, the alcohol burns off and the dollar's fine.
I would not do that. That sounds scary. Mike, what's your favorite experiment?
That's a good one. I saw one recently where I think they took like something with a battery where they do something with water and then they put a fork in the water, and then as soon as the fork is in the water, it bends.
What?
I can't think of exactly what it takes. I'll find it. I'll look it up. I'll look it up.
All right, any listeners who have some good science experiments, send them our way. Hashtag SSPod.
Yeah, let's find those out. Put those on the Instagram. Everybody else, we want to hear from you as well. Head over to our website, speechsciencepodcast.com, and email us, speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com, or give us a phone call, 614-681-1798. Selling ahead, coming up in the next couple of weeks, we got Kathy Hoffman, which is the Arizona State Superintendent and former, or current, I guess, SLP. Also, I got the author of Sloths Are Slow to sit down with me this week, and we talked about her book, so that'll be coming up as well.
And she is an SLP.
She is an SLP. And also, I talked to the two rare mama bears who host their own podcast about CMD, congenital muscular dystrophy. So those are all coming up. It's a pretty cool lineup. Our opening music, as always, it's Please Listen Carefully by Jazar. It's licensed under an attribution and share alike license. Our bump music is the County Fair Rock. Copyright a John Deku. We still appreciate it. You find his music at soundcloud.com/dirtdogmusic. And our closing music tonight, Slow Burn by Kevin MacLeod, is licensed under a Creative Commons and Attribution license. If you've got something you want us to talk about, send it to us. We will talk about it on there. Make sure you rate and review us on iTunes. That helps us find advertisers so we can keep bringing you the show. We love it. We love you, but we got bills to pay, lights to keep on. We like that kind of stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Right. All right. In the immortal words of Janice Wright, always be a willow, because when the storm of life threatens you, you might think you want to be the big oak, but the oak will crack under pressure. The willow will bend. I've got one out front, and it always stays upright. It comes right back to form. For Michelle Wintering and... Wait, did I say Wintering?
Michelle Wintering, you got it.
Oh, my brain broke halfway into that sentence. For Michelle Wintering and Michael MacLeod, I'm Matt Hott, saying so long, everybody.
Bye.
Halfway into my moment, I was like, winter, what did I do? Broke.
This has been an Exceptional Podcast Network production. Speech Science is edited and produced by MWH Production. Please follow Speech Science on Twitter @SpeechSciencePC and like our page on Facebook. For more original podcasts, please visit exceptionaled.com and rate and subscribe to our podcast anywhere you get your podcasts.